Can everybody hear me? Maybe, sorta? Yeah, because you gotta hear talk. Okay, can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Yeah. Okay, well, Project 2025 is a plan put together by the Heritage Foundation to drastically reshape the federal government. It's 920 pages long, and what you are about to see and hear is nowhere near exhaustive. Exhausting, maybe, but not exhaustive. I've tried to hit the highlights and give you an idea of some of the most egregious policy proposals. If it's implemented by the second Trump administration, Project 2025 will drastically change the way the government works, not for you, but for the rich and powerful, and maybe the famous too. Okay, so here we have Project 2025, be afraid. Yes, be afraid. All our lives will change, and not for the better. Next slide. The extreme right-wing agenda for the next Republican administration. Representative Jared Huffman, a Democrat from California, describes Project 2025 as a wrecking ball to U.S. institutions. Next slide. Brought to you by the Heritage Foundation, Project 2025 represents a threat to democracy, to civil rights, to climate, and much more, as we'll talk about. The Heritage Foundation works with over 100 right-wing organizations, and Project 2025 was written primarily by Trump administration officials. So when he says he knows nothing about it, he doesn't know any of these people, like anything else that comes out of his mouth, it's a lie. 26 of 29 collaborators, in fact, were part of the Trump administration, his first term. You may recognize some of the names. Stephen Miller, Steve Bannon, Peter Navarro, and Mark Meadows. Okay, and that's not all, but that's the highlights. Next slide. And you've probably seen this quote. This is from Kevin Roberts, who's the president of the Heritage Foundation. We are in the process of the Second American Revolution, which will remain bloodless if the left allows it to be. Bloodless? Sounds like a threat. Next slide. Okay, this is a quote from Paul Dans, who's director of the Presidential Transition Project for Project 2025. Our goal is to assemble an army of aligned, vetted, trained, and prepared conservatives to go to work on day one to deconstruct the administrative state. It's important to note that not all, but many of the policy proposals would need only an executive order to become reality, the stroke of a pen, or a Sharpie.
Good.
Next one. The staffing goals for Project 2025. The first thing they want to do is create a training academy to prepare thousands of future political appointees now to be ready on day one. Training Academy is already up and running online. Recruits answer a survey designed to expose their views on issues such as immigration and abortion so that they can be vetted for loyalty. Per Steve Bannon's War Room, this is an effort to recruit extreme loyalists to the GOP administration. The way they're going to do this is basically to reinstate something called Schedule F, reclassifying thousands of federal employees as at-will workers who could be fired if they don't follow the extremist policies of Project 2025. Experience and expertise in critical agencies could be forced out, threatening safety of food, medicine, the environment, and national security. They could replace as many as 10,000 career civil servants with people willing to take a loyalty oath, not to the Constitution, but to Donald Trump. Project 2025's handbook is called Mandate for Leadership, the Conservative Promise. It's a plan for the first 6 months of the Trump administration, and it's a roadmap for policy reversals and long-term conservative governance. Experience and expertise in critical agencies would be forced out. The document outlines how the next administration would, in the first 6 months, reorganize the federal government and implement what's called the unitary executive theory, that the president has absolute power over the executive branch. At the heart of the plan is Christian nationalism and the Seven Mountain Mandate, which is an ultra-conservative movement that wants to influence all of society: family structure, religion, education, media, business, and government. They believe that married heterosexuality is the only valid form of sexual expression and identity. They condemn single mothers. They would end no-fault divorce and put the Ten Commandments in classrooms. It's probably as least Christian as you can imagine. Attack the non-religious definition of marriage, encourage Christian indoctrination in public schools, oppose fetal cell research, and require all pregnancies to be carried to term. Not all pregnancies should be carried to term. Okay. Let's go to reproductive rights now. Project 2025 proposes a national abortion ban, to reinstate the Comstock Act, which, if you're not familiar with that, it's an old act that has not been used in forever, but it would absolutely refuse to let you use mail order to get abortion medication. Let's see. Then there's the Title X Abortion Provider Prohibition Act. That's a lot of words, but basically it takes away funding from clinics that provide abortion services or referrals, even though the funds that the federal government provides are only used for services like pap smears, HIV screenings, prenatal care, things like that. But if they even refer people for abortion, they lose their federal funding. The Department of Health and Human Services would be renamed the Department of Life and would no longer consider abortion a form of health care.
You're serious. You're serious.
I'm serious. Yeah. As a heart attack. They'd also allow states to monitor pregnancies. And, you know, I guess you get on a registry or something, and if you try to cross state lines, they want to know if you're going somewhere to get an abortion.
Or to have a drink during pregnancy.
They also reverses Biden's policy requiring hospitals to provide abortions in medical emergencies, regardless of state bans. So you bleed to death in the parking lot, I guess. You can't go to another state. Don't get me started. This gets me. Next slide. Let's go on. Okay, let's talk about LGBTQ plus rights. Project 2025 would implement the loss of protections for LGBTQ plus individuals under anti-discrimination laws. So in other words, if somebody's trying to get in. If under the anti-discrimination laws that prevent discrimination on the basis of sex or race. They added sexual identity. No more, not under Project 2025. They do promote conversion therapy. Pray away the gay. Doesn't work. Doesn't work. They would also abolish Biden's Gender Policy Council that promotes equity in government policy. And this is a good one. Claims that transgender ideology equates to pornography. That results in book bans and suggests that authors, teachers, and librarians who allow children to access these books to be sex offenders, and they can be arrested. Let's go on. Education. Eliminate the Department of Education. Reallocate public school funding to private religious schools via vouchers. Vouchers. Whatever happened to separation of church and state?
They'll abolish that too.
Is charter schools in that?
They would go, the voucher program would take federal dollars that go to public schools to give to people for sending their kids to private schools. And it's predominantly religious schools, but not all, not always. But basically that just undermines and pretty much would decimate public schools. Eliminate teachers' unions. Eliminate diversity, equity, and inclusion support policies. So what happens in schools if the DEI policies are rescinded? The kids that do well, do well. The kids that don't do so well or have challenges would fall between the cracks. Another thing that would hurt would be to eliminate Head Start. How many kids get brought up to speed by Head Start so that they're on the same page with their peers when they start kindergarten? I don't know if you're seeing a pattern here or not, but who gains and who gets hurt?
Yeah.
It's the big guys that gain and the little kids, the little guys that bear the burden. Oh, it also cuts school lunch programs. I forgot about that. Bans CRT and gender ideology. Teachers would face consequences for teaching about slavery. Next slide. Immigration. That's a good one. Dismantle the DREAM Act. All these dreamers that have been here in this country since they were little kids. English is the only language they know. They've never been to their home country. They get deported back to their home country. They don't know anybody. They don't have family there. They don't know the language. It would increase the authority of ICE, end birthright citizenship, reinstate the Muslim ban, repeal the temporary protected status designation, which means nearly 700,000 workers would lose protections and their work authorizations. And these are immigrants that are waiting for their amnesty hearings. Sometimes these things take years. So they would be sent back to their home country to face the same threats that prompted them to leave. In addition, how would the loss of hundreds of thousands of immigrant workers affect our economy? I don't know if you guys remember when Alabama decided we're not going to let immigrants work in the fields anymore, and all the tomatoes rotted on the vine. Well, that's going to happen. And it's not just farm workers or produce pickers and things like that. There's scientists and engineers that are in this program too. We lose their expertise. Next slide. Climate change. Roll back regulations to benefit businesses. When businesses don't have to adhere to federal regulations about clean water, clean air, pollution, that sort of thing, they save money because they don't have to spend their money to make these programs work. Stop participation in the Paris Climate Agreement. Yeah. It's a worldwide problem and we're just going to abdicate. Reopen Arctic oil drilling and lease Western land for coal mining. We don't need to be adding more oil and more coal and more pollution to our air. We need to be looking at alternate forms of energy. But no, Project 2025 is going to reduce funding for renewable energy and reward oil drilling, coal mining, companies like that. Also eliminate the Department of Energy agencies involved in energy transition, like the EPA. And how about NOAA? We don't need NOAA. I mean, with all these hurricanes that are coming fast and furious, we don't need to know about those things. Let's get rid of NOAA. Anyway, it's a big payoff for corporations and a boon for gas and oil companies. Next slide. Medicare, Social Security, and taxes. First thing they want to do is raise the retirement age.
To what? To what?
It would index over time, probably going up to 70 over a period of several years. They would index it according to your birthday and that kind of stuff, and they go up a couple of months every year or something till they got to 70. Just to clarify, I've heard people say that Project 2025 calls for eliminating Social Security and Medicare. And in my research, I did not find that there were proposals to do that. There are proposals to move the programs into the private sector, which, as the way I think of it, that would put your Social Security more like a 401k. So your 401k is going to be dependent on the whims of the stock market. It's not going to be a set thing that you're going to get every month of every year. And as for Medicare, I don't know if anybody's had to buy health insurance, but it would certainly be more expensive than even your supplement costs now. All right, let's see. Higher taxes for the working class and cut taxes for the wealthy corporations and wealthy people and corporations. Surprising? Not really. Radical tariff policy. You've probably heard that Trump has talked about a 10% tariff on everything coming into the country to punish these countries. Sorry, that's not how it works. When a tariff is imposed, the importer is the one that pays that tariff. And that importer, in turn, passes that extra tax onto the retailer. And what does the retailer do? Passes it along to you too. So we would pay that tariff. It's just another tax. And then they would also raise prescription drug prices and say goodbye to that $35 a month insulin, I guess. And I think also that they would not negotiate drug prices with the pharmaceutical companies. Not good for us old folks either. Okay. Department of Defense and the military want to expand the military budget by billions of dollars. We already spend more on the military than anybody in the world, but I guess we don't have enough. Also would use the military to break up domestic protests and militarize the border. The military is not meant for domestic deployment, but that's what they want to do. Fast track new innovation by passing, quote, unnecessary departmental regulations. In other words, oh, it's good enough, we'll use it the way it is. Disallow HIV and gender dysphoric individuals to serve. Require high schools to administer the military aptitude test. Some high schools offer this test for students that want it, but this would require all schools to offer or to require this aptitude test. And what it basically does is it provides the military with a pool of qualified recruits without their consent nor their parents' consent.
Are we talking draft?
I'm sorry?
Would that be the draft?
Well, it might turn into that. That's not what they're saying right now, but it's certainly the precursor. Would also rescind the COVID-19 vaccine mandate for military personnel, and also allow those folks who left the military because they refused the vaccine to come back in. And they also want to resume nuclear testing. We haven't done that for 30 years, but I guess now's the time. Next slide. Civil rights. There's a lot of overlap here with categories that we've already talked about, but suffice it to say that civil rights and the DEI programs are seen as threats to the white power structure and white supremacy. Project 2025 calls DEI offices, quote, vehicles for unlawful discrimination. Discrimination against whom?
The guys who write this plan.
The white heterosexual men that run everything.
Yeah.
They would also end marriage equality, ban African American gender studies, and ban books and education about slavery. Next slide. Consolidation of presidential power. This is a big part of this, is that they want to put as much power in the president as they can possibly do. He would have control of the DOJ. Litigation decisions must be made consistent with the president's agenda, they say. Also known as prosecution of Trump's political adversaries. Give presidential power to withhold congressionally appropriated funds. How can the president go over what Congress does? What happened to separate the balance of power? Prosecution of political rivals. Deportation of protesters. We got out there and protested, they put us all on the bus and take us to who knows what camp. And it's not summer camp.
Take us to Canada, maybe.
No, right now it's snowing.
Reward political violence, pardon the January 6th defendants. Because that was just a peaceful protest, they weren't doing anything wrong. Packing the Supreme Court with extreme far-right judges. Well, we've already seen that, but under a Trump administration it would only get worse because there are probably 2 justices that will retire during that 4-year term. That's expected. So that's 2 more. And then there's the presidential immunity that the Supreme Court just ruled on.
It's not absolute immunity though, is it?
Well,
Not yet.
But I mean, for anything that's considered in the president's purview, I guess, is the way to put it. Things outside his presidential duties are gray area now. But, with the Supreme Court the way it is, and if we got 2 more Supreme Court justices that were like-minded, he could be immune from anything. He could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue, like he said. Next slide. So Project 2025 aims to systematically dismantle our democratic checks and balances and consolidate unprecedented power in a second Trump presidency. This is a quote from Representative Jared Huffman, who is in charge of the Stop Project 2025 Task Force, a group of 13 congressional representatives that are doing briefings and learning about this and digging really into it. And they plan to have a public hearings sometime in September. So I would suggest that we all look out for that and pay attention, because they're going to know what's going on. Next one. So you've probably noticed that various elements of Project 2025 link together. They work off of each other in a strategic attack on democracy and civil liberties. It's dangerous and frightening. I'm scared. I really am. So I've got a handout here that has some sources that you can go to with the websites and everything that you can go to and read more about it, because, as I said, this is by no means comprehensive. There's so much in 920 pages, there's no way I could cover it in a half an hour. But it's important that we know what it is and what's going to happen if they implement this stuff. Next slide. So be afraid. There are two responses to fear: flight or fight. Flight means to run away, to escape, to do nothing. To fight is to take action. We need to take action. We cannot do nothing. Next slide. You can't say, I'll fight them next time. We may not get another chance. So learn all you can, do something, and some ideas for things you can do. Tell 10 people what you've learned, and tell them to tell 10 more, and spread the word that way. Share reliable information on social media, and I want to emphasize reliable. We don't want to be called fearmongers. We don't want to be accused of lying. So make sure that what you post is accurate. Write, email, or call your representatives so they know how you feel about this. Support Democrats in swing states. Those are the keys. So we can write postcards, we can make donations, we can write letters, we can get on phone banks and things like that to try to help Senate and House representatives in those swing states. Vote for Democrats up and down the ballot and help other people to get out to vote. We have a lot of people registered that never vote. What was it in Alabama? At the primary, there was like 12% of registered voters voted in the primary. We'll never make it if that's the case again. We have to get these people to the polls. Many voters, both Democrats and Republicans, are not really aware of Project 2025 yet. And my feeling is that all Democrats, and many moderate Republicans even, will not be able to stomach this vile proposition and will vote to stand up for democracy on November 5th. Thank you for your attention. Now let's go out and spread the word.